And I think we're ready to bring out our panel of climate scientists. There they are. Please welcome the following people as we introduce them on the stage. So we're sitting as we're pictured here. And here's John Nielsen-Gammon, who's the state climatologist of Texas and a professor at Texas A&M University. There have actually been...
Sure.
Bring it on.
I actually felt emboldened to say that in Austin, so thank you very much.
There have been 3 state climatologists since 1960. John has served in this role since the year 2000. And next we have Camille Parmesan, a professor at Plymouth University, and she's been a lead author for the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And Camille...
Hello, everyone.
Camille shared in 2007 when that IPCC was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. So Camille has a very small sliver out of the 2,000 people that worked on it. She's got her fragment of it, maybe not. So I'll move on. And last but not least, we have Dr. Kevin Kloesel, who directs the Oklahoma Climatological Survey at the University of Oklahoma. And Kevin, so if people want to follow up, Kevin, what address could they reach you by email?
My email address is longhorn@ou.edu.
Wait, what? Wow. It's remarkable.
You have to have a thick skin in Oklahoma to deal with climate, and I got one by being the Longhorn in Oklahoma.
Excellent. So we'll start with you, Kevin, and work our way back here. Kevin, I'd like to know your reaction. You've heard Katharine speak in the Q&A and her answers. What's your reaction to this?
Sure. Well, Senator Inhofe sends his love. You know, one of the things that Katharine said that is so true, yes, there may be dismissives, yes, there may be cautious, but these are all well-meaning people. Bottom line, I've met all of them. I know the way they feel. I know why they feel that way. These are well-meaning people for the positions that they espouse to. And they have reasons for those. You know, you saw all of this amazing research that Katharine presented. I'm going to add one more to the list. Go read Senator Inhofe's book. It's called The Greatest Hoax. If you want to know why he feels about this issue the way he does, it's all laid out in that book. These are well-meaning people. They're great people. But you have to find, like Katharine said, the place where your interests and desires for a sustainable future meet with theirs. For example, Senator Inhofe is a pilot. What's one of the biggest concerns for a pilot? It's weather. So can I talk to Senator Inhofe about the importance of weather observations, better weather observations, more weather observations? Can I do that? Absolutely. Does that help all of us in this effort to take the weather information and turn it into the climate information? Once we have that weather information there and we have it for longer periods of time, suddenly we have a better climate record. Why? Because Senator Inhofe invested in weather infrastructure. Those are the kinds of things we have to do and be creative. It was something Katharine said. You have to find what their passion and what their interest is. And that is so true, and especially true when you deal with the folks that I deal with on a regular basis, which are Senator Inhofe, their staff, Scott Pruitt, and so on.
Great example.
And you're still here. That's awesome.
I'm in Austin. Note that I'm in Austin now. Yeah, the fact that we have an organization called the Oklahoma Climate Survey, and by the way, Katharine, that's the first time I've ever seen the state of Oklahoma labeled blue. Not ever seen that before, so that was kind of cool. Yeah. So, but it speaks to the fact that we have well-meaning people in this infrastructure of weather and climate in the state of Oklahoma who believe in the importance of data, the importance of real-time climate, you name it, but weather infrastructure and weather data. If you've ever seen anything that comes out of Oklahoma, like the movie Twister or all of those things, we've got a real need for weather information. Well, that weather information becomes the climate information for the future. And I think that's something we can all get on board on, and we don't have to go down this hole of climate change so often. We can do it in the auspices of weather and sort of circumvent, those issues. So,
Camille, you have experience working with scientists, policymakers all around the world through your work with the IPCC, and your research takes you internationally. What's your reaction?
Well, what I really appreciated about your talk, fabulous talk throughout, but what I loved about it is that you're breaking huge holes into the idea that this is a religious debate. That was brilliant. It's not a religious debate. Religion has very little to do with people being climate deniers or even extreme climate alarmists, either way. And I think that's breaking out of that belief system is an important way to move forward with the arguments. We've got to really nail people with what they are really basing their attitudes on, what they're really basing their conclusions on. And I agree, I think it's politics and money. And an interesting thing is that I was a professor at University of Texas. I'm now a professor at Plymouth University in England. And so it's been very interesting talking about climate change throughout Europe compared to talking about it throughout the USA. And one thing that has struck me as so different in the minds of the public is the attitude towards science. Now, I grew up in the USA during the missions to the moon. Science was incredibly respected, incredibly important. An enormous amount of money was spent on those missions. No one bothered, no one cared. Everyone was supported, everyone wanted to go to the moon, everyone wanted to be an astronaut, including me. Something happened somewhere 20 years ago, maybe 25, and suddenly science became a dirty word to a lot of people. And when I started working in Europe, one of the most refreshing things is that science is still very respected there. You say you're a scientist, and what you say has more weight. You give scientific conclusions, and that has more weight than someone's belief that's based on no information. And so one of the things I actually was curious about, no, sorry, didn't mean it that way. Their belief in climate change being based on no information. And so one of the things that I've been wondering about is, one, why is there this difference now? Why is science respected throughout Europe and really not respected as much here? And why did this change? Americans didn't used to be that way. So what caused this change in the American culture? And I don't have the answer. I'm just throwing that out.
It's Q&A the other way.
Yes. Tell us.
John.
Well, I usually when I talk about science, but I'm also a Caucasian Roman Catholic, which I find out from Katharine means that I probably occupy this side of the bar, at least if I fit the demographic profile, but in reality I'm a lot farther over here. But I have friends who are down this end and talk to them occasionally about climate change. And to a large extent their reaction to Pope Francis's encyclical was, what does the Pope know about climate change? And he actually has there actually is an Office of Science within the Vatican, so he knows more about climate change than most religious leaders probably do. But apart from that, the encyclical itself doesn't have a lot of stuff about climate change in it. Its main themes are, we are using the resources of the world and affecting the world because of that, and the effects mainly go to the poor people of the world and future generations. And that covers a lot of territory, not just climate change. And his response to that is not actually the argument that Katharine has made very well, which is we can save money and help the climate at the same time, his reaction is, this is our world. This is our humanity. This is our moral responsibility. Why does it need to be economically beneficial? It's the right thing to do no matter what. And so reading that made me take a step back and say, well, okay, yeah, I'm going to advocate for things that put a price on carbon, and that's probably the way it's going to work out if we make a big dent in climate change, but let's not actually give up on humanity doing the right thing.
Catherine, do you have any, Kevin, I'm going to come back to you. I'm going to say if there's one more thing you'd want people to know on any of these topics, what would that be?
No pressure.
No,
One thing.
I think you mentioned children. There are teachers out there that are clamoring for what do I teach in this area. And I think it's incumbent upon our community, but it's incumbent upon each of you as well. Many of you seem to have sort of the same passion. You could tell that by the applause and the laughter, and there seems to be a consistent feel in this room. All right, now it's time to go out and do your part. It's involving yourself in schools, going to things like this. How many students are out here? All right, cool. It's on you guys. Right? It is on you to take the message, to take the things you learn and spread it. That's the only way this is going to happen. And I think that's the one thing that we're trying to get involved within the state of Oklahoma is we got to get in the schools. We've got to get into, and we're not talking about, and this is the thing that always happens. Well, we don't have a high school blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I'm not talking about the high school. I'm talking about kindergarten, right? Talking about kindergartners and first graders. Trust me, if you give a third grader the word vorticity for a spelling word, they will spell it, they'll define it, they'll know all these technical terms that you think you got to dumb it down. You don't have to dumb it down.
Thanks, Kevin. Camille, one more thing you'd want everyone to know.
I'm going to end on a more hopeful note than my last comment, which is that I loved your graph about the types of people when it comes to climate change. What percentage are strong alarmists versus strong deniers? And really, we've all had climate deniers when we've given talks in the audience, but really it is a very small proportion of people who are diehard deniers or dismissives that absolutely there's no point talking to them. So I don't bother with that tiny percentage of people. But an awful lot of people, they think they're deniers. Once you start talking to them, you find out they're really just a bit confused. They really just haven't had the time to look into the information. So what I'd like to encourage you, and I know a lot of you are with the Citizens Climate Lobby here, is to talk to people out of your comfort zone. I think most of the time I have found that as I talk, we get more comfortable with each other. They're more willing to listen to me. I start realizing, where they're coming from, which is usually a lot of misinformation or simply they're too busy to have looked into it. And so I've actually had some mostly very good experiences with people who come up to me saying, well, I'm a climate skeptic, or I'm a, whatever. And you just say, well, okay, let's get beyond the words, let's just talk about it. And so I do encourage you, talk to people outside of your group, go out of your comfort zone, and I think you'll find a lot of satisfaction in doing that, and hopefully a lot of positive feedback.
John.
I'm going to just talk a little bit about a phrase that nobody here has said because it's a lousy phrase, the phrase being the science is settled. You heard a lot of things about which science is settled. The carbon dioxide causes warming of the planet. We know roughly how much warming that is. We know where the carbon dioxide came from. but then you sometimes hear the argument, well, wait a minute, if the science is settled, why are we still doing research on it? And furthermore, if the science isn't settled, then why do we think we should be doing something about it yet when we still don't know what's going to happen? The reason I'm concerned about climate change is because so much of the science is not settled. We've never gone through this experiment with the planet before. It's not one I would have chosen to make. And we don't know what the outcome is going to be, even if we could predict exactly how much carbon dioxide was going to be in the atmosphere in 100 years. So I'm not convinced about doing something about climate change because of what we know. I'm convinced about doing something about climate change because of what we don't know that could happen.
And to pick up on that, John, do you think just based on the uncertainty of what the outcomes will be, do you think that makes it really essential that we remain optimistic? Because if enough people are pessimistic, do we already know what the outcome will be?
Well, I mean, you can be optimistic in different ways. You can be optimistic to say that, hey, I think climate sensitivity is going to be at the low end of the spectrum, and so it's not going to be that bad. The great thing about taking action against climate change is what you do is you start by eliminating the most catastrophic possibilities, and you gradually work your way down from there. So the first steps are the most important ones. That's why, we aren't going to meet the goal of 2 degrees Celsius warming through the Paris Accords, even if we do continue to commit to what we said we were going to do. But we're taking a step in that direction, and most importantly, it's the step that eliminates what would have otherwise been the most catastrophic consequence. So we can be pessimistic about making it down to 2 degrees, but we can be optimistic about the fact that everything we do is going to make a difference, and the first step is the most important one.
Right on. Right on. I'm going to try and experiment with you guys, all 4 of you. I'm going to ask you one question, and I'm going to ask you to answer in unison, and we'll see how that goes. It's an experiment.
You want 4-part harmony or what?
It's an experiment. There's uncertainty involved. Question comes from Anonymous. Is promoting veganism a good way to promote sustainability and live a more sustainable life? One.
Absolutely.
Depends.
In Oklahoma, we have a very famous shirt in Oklahoma, and it says on the front, vegetarian. On the back, it says Native American for poor hunter.
Camille, do you want to round out the very synchronized answer?
I think it's a very, how should I put it? It obviously, being a vegan has much lower carbon emissions, right, than being a vegetarian or being a meater. There's no question about that. But will everyone become a vegan? Not very likely. For a lot of different reasons, partly some parts of the world, meat is actually the primary source of food, meat, fish, whatever. So it's not even possible in all parts of the world. And physiologically, a lot of people can't live on a vegan diet. So I think it's a laudable goal, but I think people do need to be realistic that, the whole world isn't going to go over to being vegan. We need to promote lifestyles, broad lifestyles that are sustainable in many different ways, many different facets.
But, yeah, sure. I was going to mention, you don't have to be completely veganism to cut back on meat consumption and eat more grains that require less energy input. I have started eating more of a vegetable diet, but not actually because of climate change, my primary concern, but for animal welfare is my primary concern. And so when I eat sausage, I try to find wild boar sausage that was that was made from invasive species in Texas, because you're tackling a lot of problems by doing that. You're not using any resources that we want to keep out there. But yeah, veganism is another one of those religious issues, and people think they have to either be vegan or not vegan, but you can do as much or as little as you want to, and you're still doing something.
And I have to add that if you look at these charts of sort of carbon emissions from different foods, greenhouse-grown tomatoes, strawberries have extremely high carbon emissions associated with them. So just being vegan is actually not going to completely do it either. You need to be smart. You need to be careful. You need to sort of know where things have come from, how they've been raised, and think smartly about your diet.
All right, so Katharine, last comment.
Sure. You can see how many different topics come up when you bring up this issue of climate change. I mean, we have covered all of the big ones that I started with, and then we've also covered personal lifestyle choices, politics. Didn't quite touch on football, thank goodness. Want to make sure we all make it off this stage. But you can have conversations about the economy, national security, your kids, skiing, hunting, fishing, what you're making for dinner, where you found a new source, a new grocery store. There's all kinds of conversations we can have. And again, the number one thing each of us can do walking out of here is start talking about this issue more, because that is the one thing we are actually not doing.
Hear, hear.